We have here our speakers this morning. Dr. Arsenio Balisacan from the Director General of NEDA and Social Economic Planning Secretary. Dr. Mark Rosegrant of the IFPRI and Director Mercy Sombrilla from NEDA. Warren De Guzman from ANC.
First Secretary Balisacan. Can you talk about the development of agriculture in terms of readiness for more competition, more pressures associated with free trade, with the expiry of quantitative control on rice imports in 2017, and of course the deadline for compliance with the ASEAN integration at the end of this year?
Okay. Yeah. As you know, our neighbors are all preparing themselves for this deepening of that integration among member countries. And of course, Philippines is also very much challenged, especially in relation to our agriculture, because not done quite well in the last 5 years. Of course, partly owing to the exposure of the sector to so many disasters. But some of our sectors are quite competitive. For example, our banana, our pineapple, our some crops, even corn. We are quite challenged with certain sectors, like of course rice, our major staple, because many of our rice-producing areas are often hit by strong typhoons, and also that certain policies in the past have continued to affect the performance of the sector, including, of course, our current policy and imports with respect to rice. As you know, we have our rice sector is currently protected by the so-called quantitative restrictions. We were able to get from the WTO, exempting our rice from complete opening up via tariffs or the conversion of all restrictions, qualitative restrictions to tariffs. The commodity that was exempted from that regime, or in that conversion to that regime, is the rice. Okay. We have until 2017 for that to continue that regime, and by then we are expected to tarify that restriction. And what that means is our market rice market would now become more predictable, transparent, and more market friendly, and we should take advantage of that from now on to 2017 to prepare that sector. In the meantime, we have been investing quite aggressively in other areas of competitiveness in the rural economy, particularly in the area of infrastructure. That's quite a substantial increase in our budget for infrastructure development, as you know, from 2% of GDP in 2012 to 4% this year, and by next year 5% of GDP, and we should continue to increase investment in that area. The bigger challenge also is linking our small farmers, our small producers, in the supply chain, especially in the global supply chain, and the high value supply chain, so that our farmers would be able to get their produce in the markets at much higher prices.
Follow up on the rice. When you got the 5-year extension for the quantitative controls on rice imports, so that was we're basically in the middle of the extension. How would you gauge the situation of the rice industry in the Philippines right now? Do you think we're ready for those restrictions to be lifted in 2017, or do you think we're far from it?
We should have been ready 20 years ago, 30 years ago. We should have really put the competitiveness measures long ago. Many of our neighbors were able to do that, and there's no reason why we cannot make our agricultural sector more competitive, including our rice sector. It's just that we need to focus on improving productivity, investing in areas where this should make a dent, substantial dent on our on the productivity of farming. For example, of course, we are now addressing the issue of infrastructure, but there are many other sources of productivity that we have quite neglected in many years. Irrigation development until now is we have a substantial area of our rice lands is unirrigated. Our mechanization, level of mechanization is very low. Our post-harvest facilities are full state. Of course, that's partly reflected by the low investments of the private sector. And we have to ask, why is private sector not investing in aggressively in post-harvest facilities, in food processing, and so on and so forth? So in other words, we need to ask what has been holding the sector from growing. And in my presentation this morning, I presented at least three sources. One is that the rural markets, particularly agricultural markets, need to become more transparent, more credible, more market friendly, so that investors would bring their monies in rural areas. And I've cited a number of reasons what those are. What's preventing those investors from going to agriculture. The second is the reason that I mentioned is the infrastructure development program. And the third is the property rights issue in agriculture, particularly in relation to the agrarian reform program. It was a good program, it has a good intentions, but in the process, it has prevented land markets from developing, and therefore the creating markets in agriculture, in rural areas, did not grow as much as we want to, and therefore credit dried up in agriculture, and the sources of productivity therefore were much diminished over the years.
Secretary, just would you go so far as saying that the agri sector is the least prepared for more competition with that comes with expanded free trade?
It's quite mixed, no? As I said, there are some sectors of our agriculture that are doing well. Some would need more assistance, but I think overall the task should be to invest in those areas where productivity growth is most promising. We have a lot, of those options and of those opportunities. But the trick is really that the private sector must be able to see that investing in agriculture is as a worthy undertaking. So that means you have to address the issue of risk. You have to address the issue of high cost of doing business in agriculture. You have to address the issue of the unpredictability of our policy environment to the extent that that is seen as an issue by the private sector.
Hi, Ordinario from Business Mirror.
You can also attach your question on speaker. You always see me. If you don't always see me.
Sir, this question can be answered by Secretary Balisacan or I just wanted to know because we've been talking about the QR for a very long time, but nobody has really talked about what kind of sacrifices we will need to keep the QR there, and what would be the what were the consequences of these sacrifices to the agriculture growth in the country. And then second, what level of growth would be enough to eradicate rural poverty and to increase productivity?
First, on the QR, no? The minimum access volume was part of the negotiation that we had when we signed on to the World Trade Organization, and that allowed us to exempt some commodities from this tarification. Rice is one of them, and it's now the only one remaining. Now, in the process of accession, we passed a law, Republica, which tarified all the QRs except for rice. Now, that tarification does not have a ending date. So the issue now is, even as we are able to get an extension, another extension from WTO for the application of that QR, we need to amend. That's one view, no? That we need to amend that particular law so that this quantitative restriction can be converted into tariffs. The good thing about the tariff is that it is a more transparent, more predictable instrument of protecting farmers. The thing about the QR is it's not transparent, and it often invariably lead to higher prices. And that's what happened in 2013, 2014. Because of the strength of the QR, we were not, supply was not coming in by way of imports, even as production was quite low. No? And that reduced this tax held by firms, households, even NFA, and that led to increases in prices. Now, of course, if we have a transparent regime that says this is the tariff, and firms are seeing that the prices are creeping up, they would import. But under a QR regime, they would not import. They would have to get permission from the agency that implements the QR. So our experience, just to cut short this whole experience, that although the QR affords some protection to our farmers, the overall cost on the economy has been so high, especially among the poor, because that has led to a double-digit inflation for rice, when the overall inflation was only 2% to 5%. So that's a very anti-poor. And there are other ways of supporting more efficiently farmers by, for example, building more irrigation systems, increasing their access to machineries, post-harvest facilities, helping them link with credit markets, with the supply chain, so that they could get higher returns for their produce. Those are far more sustainable, far more enriching for farmers, and that's what we are pushing moving forward.
Sir, regarding the agriculture growth that you're at.
Okay. Now, as Dr. Rosgrant showed in his presentation, uh, the, uh, uh, the performance of the agricultural sector is so critical to poverty reduction. And that's very simple to understand. Still, about one third of the total employment, the labor force is in agriculture. And the bulk of that one third are really poor people and highly vulnerable groups of our population. So if you could raise productivity in agriculture, that would make a substantial dent and poverty for the country as a whole. Now, the beauty about doing something about productivity in agriculture, raising productivity in agriculture, is that will also help improve the competitiveness of the other sectors of the economy, particularly industry, manufacturing. And when job opportunities are open up there, you have far better quality employment generated, and that's what will sustain poverty reduction and economic growth. Now, you cannot, no country has ever really eliminate poverty in agriculture in a few years, especially when you're starting from a very high base of poverty, low incomes, and very low productivity. We have to sustain the growth of the economy. That our growth, as you know, is averaging at 6.2%. If we can sustain that in the next decade more, 2 decades more, we should be able to eliminate at least the most basic form of poverty in this country. But that means that as the economy grows at that level, productivity in agriculture, growth in agriculture must also come at similar pace.
So sir, just to clarify, in terms of agriculture growth, how much should we be hitting for us to really make a dent on
Usually, the rate of agricultural growth is lower than the overall economic growth. That's everywhere, almost everywhere. That's a good reason for that. Now, if you can grow our agriculture can grow at 3 to 4%, which is about the average for the world. We should be able to substantially reduce that poverty. As you have seen earlier, our growth, the agricultural sector was growing at only 1.7% yearly for the last 5 years. That's too low. We can double that. In fact, 5% is still doable if we can diversify our agricultural production towards the crops that, for example, that Dr. Javier was mentioning. If we can double the number of irrigation areas that we have, if we can invest more in technologies that are resistant to drought, resistant that more climate change proof, I think that it should be possible.
sustain that growth at the medium term level, in a medium term or long term?
Well, the 3 to 5% we can have that in the near term to medium term. You don't have to wait for that. For example, the good thing about agriculture is that the turnaround is very quick. Unlike manufacturing, you have to build your plant. It could probably takes you 1 or 2 years or even 3 years depending on the plant. In agriculture, you provide the inputs to farmers, give them access to credit. They can turn around their crops from rice to something else in less than a year, in 6 months. So it's very quick turnaround.
Thanks, sir.
We have next TV5, Beverly Mandela.
Sir, the DA is they're keeping with their target for the full year growth target of 3 to 3.5. Do you think that's feasible to end the year for the agri sector with a 3 to 3.5% growth, given that El Nino is slated to increase and intensify?
For this year, very unlikely. Yeah, because even as of now, the first half is already negative. So I do expect that to be even worse in the second half because as our Pag-asa, UST, is telling us that the El Nino is likely to peak around November, December, January. And it covers the time country for the El Nino.
Sir, in line with that, sir, the DA also asked for additional budget of almost $1 billion, 140 million, or I think set to increase that amount. Have the economic managers agreed to that?
No, we are submitting this month to the roadmap to mitigate the impact of the El Nino, including our interventions for agriculture. And the submission of the Department of Agriculture is included in that, and we are betting on the effectiveness of these programs. We are asking our scientists to vet the proposal so that we have better confidence about the potential impact.
Sir, but given the El Nino, sir, do you think additional funding is needed? That much additional funding?
We are still compiling all the information, whether that can be covered by the existing budget, because as you know, we've had some challenges on spending the budget. No? So if there is a need to ask Congress for additional appropriation, we need to go. But as of now, it looks like we have enough space, fiscal space. And since for 2016, because the El Nino will last until the second quarter of next year, the budget for the 2016 is still being debated, discussed in Congress, and so we still have the window to make the appropriate representation so far as the response to El Nino is concerned.
And Ben De Vera from Inquirer.
Follow up to Mike's question earlier regarding the QRE case, Republic Act 8170 submitted. So we moved from a pure regime now to a tariff regime. What would be the ideal level of tariff to slap the rice? Should we keep the high 40% anything on rice? But then in that case, it will also still protect the farmers. It will not be free market or open market as you wanted.
We would have to study that carefully, but off the cap, I would say that a good way to start so as not to destabilize the farmers' expectation is you could start with the tariff equivalent of the QR and then commit to gradually reducing.
35%.
Yeah, 30 to 40%, but commit to reduce that over time, and that could be negotiated with ASEAN. But the whole point is that that even at 30% tariff, that's a much better regime than QR, which makes the trade so unpredictable.
Any more questions? Last two questions. Okay, Warren.
A question for Dr. Rosner. Can you compare Philippine agriculture policy and performance with the rest of the region, strengths and weaknesses? Just briefly.
Yeah, I think Secretary Balisacan has already put forward some of the key issues that most of the other countries in the region liberalized agriculture earlier and faster with fairer trade regimes and reduction in subsidies. You know, farmers are unlikely to become really efficient and highly productive if they're protected in a sense from competition. So that's why these reductions in trade barriers that the Secretary has talked about are so important. But then, as you do that, it's also necessary to invest in the productivity growth of farmers. If they're just left on their own, as those protections are gone, they're never going to come up quick enough in the growth. So that's why you do need these increased investments in research and development, bring the private sector more into play in agriculture, and increase infrastructure investment. You know, Indonesia and Vietnam, and when they did their takeoffs, they were growing through pure productivity growth of 3 to 4%, and as much as 6 to 7% value-added growth in agriculture, 15 to 20-year periods. And that's how you get the kind of transformation that we're talking about that would reduce poverty and hunger very substantially. So it's that, and those were very much driven by opening to markets and heavy investments in rural infrastructure and R&D.
Last question for our speakers. Okay.
You said a lot of the way to go to improvement of the agriculture or the other crops is through the private sector investing in those crops. But do you think this will be the way to go in growing and getting our targets moving forward? And what are the steps that the government is undertaking to entice the private sector to invest in the crops that you mentioned? And for the record, these extra crops that are that you are marketing for the private sector.
Let's put that question in a broader context. A very interesting question. Our economy is largely a private sector economy. It's almost 88% of the economy is private sector. The rest is government. Now, agriculture is composed of largely of the private sector, then of farmers. Now, the government's role there is actually very small. And in the past, even that role is not played well to the extent that the proper support services were not provided at adequate levels or at the right time or at the right quality, and so there you have. Now, if you look at the agricultural sector, especially where the private sector is quite active, you find that the agricultural economy is very strong, very vibrant. You go, for example, in banana, in pineapple, in coffee, in cacao, and even in corn, where farmers now access their planting materials from the private sector. The key is to make the private sector vibrant, efficiently operating. And earlier this morning, I mentioned that the role of government should be to facilitate, to enhance market development rather than to stifle that market. Because experiences everywhere, even in the former communist centrally planned China and now Vietnam, as Dr. Sebastian was mentioning, the role of the private sector is very strong. In fact, poverty reduction became so massive when they let the private sector take a stronger role in generating the investment, linking the farmers to the markets, providing the credit, the technology, and so on. I think that's part of the mantra that we need to change. That because some of us have the view that the private sector is an exploiter. The private sector is the middleman that takes so much margins from the farmers' prices. No? If you look closer at the experience, that's hardly the case. That in fact, in those cases where the wages are high, that is what the farmers receive for their produce and what the consumers pay, a big part of that wage has nothing to do with the middleman seizing a big part of that pie, of that wedge, but it has much to do with very high transaction costs. For example, very poor logistics, very high transport costs, uncertainty of the market is an order problem. So many tongs that have to be paid along the way as the product is moved from the farmer to the market. When you put all this together, you find out that that's the source of the wealth, not the exploitative nature of the private market or businessman.
Okay, so that ends. There's still one more. Came from Ted Torres, Philippine Star.
You mentioned your country is the fourth champions. Reform champions.
Yes.
Are you referring to the second persons? Are you referring to things about property rights and policy investment reforms?
Now I'm referring to someone who could champion for us reforms in our institutions, reforms in our policies, so that we would be able to generate more quality jobs, would be able to reduce the poverty substantially. And some of the problems that I mentioned earlier, haggling the agricultural economy, are exactly those kind of reforms that we needed, and we needed champions from the legislative branches of government. We needed champions from the executive branch of government, champions from the academe who would help us from the civil society and so on. We really need to get that gel into our public mindset so that we can get this reform momentum continue.
Okay, thank you, our dear speakers. Thank you for the members of the press who are